Hey everyone, Crow back again, and I've recently finished playing all the games included in Piko Interactive Collection 4 for the Evercade. And that means it's time again for another video. I'm going to talk about each of the games in the order of how much I like them, starting with the one I like the least. So let's get into it. Alright, we're starting off here with the doozy. This is Star X, which was originally released for the Game Boy Advance in 2002. And the best phrase I could use to describe this game is Dollar Store Star Fox. Yeah, so this is obviously trying to do Star Fox on the Game Boy Advance hardware, but without the aid of any enhancement chips like was used in Star Fox for the Super Nintendo. And the best thing I think anybody could say about this game is, wow, they pulled off a game like Star Fox on the Game Boy Advance. But did they really? You see, I don't think this game is very playable. Now, Star Fox didn't have the greatest frame rate. It ran at 20 frames per second, but the game was still playable. You could pretty much perform all the maneuvers you wanted to and accurately fly the ship wherever you wanted it to go. Star X, on the other hand, even when the game is running at 20 frames per second, well, it could be very difficult to aim your shots and pick up power-ups. But the game doesn't run at a constant 20 frames per second. That's only the best case scenario. I've checked footage that I've captured and I caught the game running at only 8 frames per second during the second boss fight. At that frame rate, good luck controlling your ship is all I can say. Also, the level right after the first boss fight forces you to destroy every mine in the area while being chased by enemy craft. Why though? According to the game's story, you're trying to escape back to Earth. So why is the game forcing me to fly around in circles to destroy every landmine in the area? Oh, and if you get destroyed while doing it, you have to start all over again. And this is right after a boss fight. And you might assume the game would just refill your shields in between every level, but it doesn't. If you finish that boss fight with only 10% of your shield left, that's what you're going to be starting the next level with. This game wants to be Star Fox so bad, but it doesn't know what made Star Fox fun to play. This game was a novelty at best when it was released. People were amazed they could play a game like Star Fox on the Game Boy Advance. But this Evercade collection was released in 2024. It can't survive on that novelty factor after 22 years. This game just feels totally broken. It's been a while since I've done this, but I'm giving this game a 1 out of 10. Oh, and on a side note, I did play all the way through the game, but only because there are a few cheats you can enable via passwords. If you enter the password GSBOOM, you get infinite smart bombs. The password GSHard gives you invincibility, and the password GSMax gives you maximum powered weapons. Doing this just let me see how frustrating this game would have been if I tried to play it normally. Originally going under the names Bop and Rumble and Street Hassle for the Commodore 64 and PC, Bad Street Brawler is a side-scrolling beat-em-up type game that was ported to the NES in 1989. This was only one of 2 games that supported the Power Glove for the NES, but the game plays just fine with a standard controller. The streets are no longer safe for the average citizen. Punks, bikers, and other no-goodniks are out there roaming the neighborhoods. So Duke Dunnigan, or Duke Davis, depending on if you read the manual or the back of the box, decides he's going to clean up the streets in the most awkward way possible. This game contains 15 levels of left-to-right beat-em-up action, and depending on what level you're on, depends on the moves you can perform. Yeah, I know it's unusual, but that's what they did here. Duke has 3 attacks he can perform by hitting button 1, button 2, or buttons 1 and 2 together. And depending on what level you're on, those attack moves will be different. Fortunately, before each stage starts, you're able to practice your moveset on a punching bag, and then it's just a matter of figuring out what's the best moves to use on the various enemies you'll encounter in the game. As you defeat enemies, sometimes an item will start to float away up into the sky, and if you can collect it, you'll sometimes regain health, but at the very least you'll gain bonus points at the end of the level. Now, if you think you should fight and defeat every enemy you encounter, you'll learn really quick that it's not a good idea. And that's because there's a time limit on each stage. Now, it turns out there's only a few enemies you actually need to defeat in order to clear the stage. So I would just run to the right, ignoring all the enemies until the screen stops scrolling, defeat those guys, and then just keep running to the right again and repeat until the stage ends. You know, it's a funny thing. I remember making an attempt to play this game several years ago, and I just remember it being just an absolutely terrible game. But as I was playing this, I could kind of see what they were going for here. It just really isn't executed very well. You wind up having to ignore many of the enemies just to make the time limit, and then when you discover the best move to use on a specific enemy, spamming that move is just usually your best option. This isn't called bad Street Brawler for nothing. It's bad, alright. 3 out of 10. Target Renegade is a beat-em-up that's actually a sequel to Renegade from Technos. You know Renegade. It's the game that spawned both the Kunio-kun and Double Dragon series. Well, apparently it spawned this Target series as well, mostly for home computers at the time. Target Renegade was ported to the NES in 1990, and that's the version that's in this collection. The plot is paper thin, as you would expect. You know, Mr. Big has kidnapped your brother, so you're just beating everyone up until you find him. Now, I'm just going to say this straight out, that this game is terrible in several ways. However, the one good thing I could say is that the soundtrack is pretty good. But let's just dive into the game's problems. I'd say the biggest problem is the controls. You have a button for punching and another for kicking. So far, so good. Pushing up and kick will do a straight up jump kick, and up and right or up and left will do a moving jump kick, and that wouldn't be bad, except the recovery time from the jump kick is so long that unless you've landed really far away from the enemy, they're going to be able to recover and hit you before you can move again. Also, since you can move around the screen freely, if you happen to be moving up on the screen and press kick, you may accidentally do a flying kick if you just wanted to do a normal kick. But what's worse is if you're moving down on the screen and press punch, you won't punch because pushing down and punch is the button combination to pick something off the ground. And hey, other games have done that and it's worked out just fine. Well, yeah, because in most other beat-em-ups, your character will only bend down to pick something up if there's actually something on the ground to pick up. Whereas here, you'll always try to pick something up, even if there's nothing there. And if there is something you want to pick up, you have to be in just the right spot. Otherwise, you'll miss it. Controls like this aren't the only issue. Hit detection is pretty poor as well. And sometimes your enemy or even your character will suffer from delayed reaction syndrome. Like if a guy hits you, but your character was busy in some other animation, it'll wait for that animation to finish, and like a second or two later, you'll finally react to being hit. One of the biggest insults, though, is the ending of the game. Now, I'm going to spoil it here because I don't think anybody will care, but when you rescue your brother, he gets kidnapped again like 5 seconds later and the game just starts again. Yeah, this is one of those games that doesn't end until you lose all your lives. Oh wait, that's right, you only have one life. Then it's game over. But you do have continues if you really want to start at the beginning of the last stage you were on. I think this game's pretty bad. 3 out of 10. The Fidgetts was originally released for the original Game Boy back in 1993 and is commonly categorized as a puzzle platformer. But it's actually more than just that. I'll elaborate on that in a bit, but primarily this game is about getting 2 mice through each level within the allotted time limit. You actually need to control both mice by swapping controls between the two, and you have to get both mice to the exit to pass the level. They both have a slingshot with limited ammo to help defend against other animals that may do them harm, and they can both pick up and throw certain objects. But the primary difference between the two is that the taller mouse can jump higher and farther than the shorter mouse, whereas the smaller mouse can access certain areas that the taller mouse can't because, well, I guess he never really learned how to duck down a little bit. Anyway, the shorter mouse can also help give the taller one a boost as well. Now, if you think puzzle platforming is all you'll be doing in this game, well, you're in for a surprise, because after you beat each level, you'll be taken to a bonus game that's much like the game Breakout. There's nothing at stake here, but there are some things you could gain, such as more ammo for your slingshot or an extra life. But if you think that's all there is to the game, Well, you never made it past the 5th level, because then, out of nowhere, you're navigating a river in a boat. Make it through successfully, and then you'll find this game has boss fights. Now, I need to stop at this point and tell you that I think this game is pretty bad, and here's why. The puzzle platforming levels are mostly impossible to complete on your first attempt because the time limit given is so short. Even if you know exactly what to do, when you finish the level, you may only have seconds left on the clock. You can't see very much of the screen at any one time, and you'll need to explore and evaluate the layout of the level before you can even begin to figure out what you need to do. Most of the time, if you make just one mistake, you usually won't have enough time to finish the level. On top of that, the game will throw in a random game mechanic here or there that you wouldn't think of doing. A prime example of this is the level with the killer plant that'll kill you if you touch it. Unless you happen to be holding this object, whatever this is. Then you can kill it just by walking into it, which is not something you would think of trying since the game has trained you to think that the plant was deadly. The game only has 20 of these puzzle platforming levels, so I think they made the time limits extremely short to ensure you'll have to play them multiple times, because once you know what to do, the game is pretty easy providing you don't make any mistakes. Now, I could complain about the breakout game and how the ball will just do random things like bounce the opposite way it's supposed to, or sometimes just plow through a bunch of bricks all at once, but since it's a bonus game, it's really the least of the game's problems. The boss fights, on the other hand, really confused me because I had no idea how I was supposed to beat them. But it turns out all you need to do is wait until they do a certain animation, and then you touch them, and that causes them damage somehow. There's some cases where it looks like they're dealing you damage, but you look and, no, you're fine. You haven't lost any health. Now, remember that river game I mentioned that happens after level 5? There's nothing like that again. Until you beat the 20th level. I thought I had beat the game, but no. Then I had to play this balloon game twice. And then this railroad game, and that took me quite a while to figure out because the game never tells you how to change tracks, you just have to figure it out on your own. And then, believe it or not, there's a maze segment that takes place in the third person. I absolutely don't know what the point of it was because I didn't encounter anything while I was wandering through it. And then, finally, one last boss fight to finish the game. The pacing of the game is just so bizarre. The difficulty of the levels don't seem quite right because some of the later levels seemed way easier than the first few I played. And I just don't understand throwing all these different types of games at you after you finish the final puzzle. I think that all these different games shouldn't have been included at all, and the game doesn't need boss fights either. The levels should have just all been puzzle platformers with maybe double the time limit, and there should have been like 40 levels instead of 20, because it really does seem like the tight time limits are there just to make sure you don't make it through the 20 levels so quickly. I got so irritated by the time limit by the second or third level that I just watched a playthrough to help me get through the rest of the game, because there's no way I was going to keep replaying the levels over and over and over again just so I could figure out where things are located. I'm giving this a 4 out of 10. Though I have to say, I got a good laugh at how absurdly long you have to wait after your mouse dies, as you have to wait for his ghost to ascend to heaven. Alright, so Skuljagger Revolt of the Westicans is a game I knew more about the advertising than the game itself. In fact, I don't even know if I remember seeing any screenshots from this game before. I only remember magazine ads that look like this, and box art that looked like this. And man, they love plastering this guy's face everywhere. Now, Skuljagger is a platforming hack and slash game that was released in 1992 only for the Super Nintendo and only in North America. One thing I have to note, though, is that the instruction manual for this game was 80 pages long, and it wasn't so large because the game was super complicated or it had instructions in 10 languages or anything. No, it's because the first 70 pages were a comic book that really goes into the story of the game. However, I gotta say that maybe they should have spent more time making a good game and less time worrying about the story. One of the things the advertising for the game brags about is that there are a ton of secrets and hidden levels to find in the game. Now, I played through the game once, and I found 2 hidden levels accidentally, So I think most of them you're going to have to go out of your way to find. And that 70-page comic in the manual does give you clues about where to find these secrets. But if the game isn't that great, then why would anyone care to find its secrets? And also, let me get this out of the way now, but the game's frame rate is terrible. At its best, it's running at 30 frames per second, but it's constantly fluctuating between 20 and 30, depending on what's on the screen, and I'm pretty sure it dips into the teens at times. This can make the timing of your actions really hard to get right. The frame rate can get so bad that sometimes it looks like your guy isn't even swinging his sword. Speaking of which, jumping and attacking is really messed up because it changes the trajectory of your jump in mid-air. If you have to jump a gap, and then you have to swing your sword to attack an enemy, you're going to come up short. One thing that took me a while to figure out was where my health bar was. Sometimes I could take a hit, and other times I would just die. I eventually figured it out though. Throughout the game, you'll collect green gems, red gems, and blue gems. Blue gems just increase your time limit and actually don't really matter that much. If you can collect 25 green gems, you'll get an extra life, and if you have at least one red gem, then you could fire a little red bullet out of your sword. Yeah, it's strange, I know. Anyway, if you get hit once, you'll lose all your red gems. If you have no red gems, then you'll lose all your green gems. If you have no green gems or red gems, that's when you die. So it's kind of like Sonic with the rings, only it's worse because the gems don't spill out into the ground when you get hit. They're just gone. There are also giant blue gems as well, but you just touch those to complete a level. What's hilarious to me though is the pose your guy makes when he completes the level. It looks like he's shocked he made it to the end. Like he really didn't think you could do it, but you did. One thing I haven't mentioned yet are the bubblegum power-ups, which really seem out of place in a game like this. You'll occasionally pick up fruit in the game, like a cherry, orange, grapes, or a lime, but these are actually bubblegum flavors. When you activate the gum, you'll get a temporary ability based on that fruit. The cherry will let you float, the orange will let you spit out little orange grenades, the grape will turn you into an invincible bouncing ball, and the lime, well, it does this. I usually never really used the gum unless I was fighting a boss. Speaking of which, I think they expected you to come up with some unusual strategies for defeating them. The ghost boss is a perfect example of this. In the center of the screen is an infinitely respawning cherry. So grab the cherry, fight the boss until your back is up against the wall, activate the cherry gum, and get hit on purpose. You'll just lose the cherry power-up and nothing more. And then you can use the invincibility frames to run past all the ghosts and then pick up a new cherry and repeat. Now, unless I'm missing something, I think it's very weird they expected you to use iframes to beat the boss. Overall, I just don't think this game was put together very well and was rushed out the door half-baked. I'm giving this a 4 out of 10. Risky Woods started out as an Amiga game that was released in 1992, but shortly after received a port to the Sega Genesis/Mega Drive, which is the version here in this collection. I bring this up because it really does feel like a port of an Amiga game, but there were significant changes made that affect the game in several ways. But I'm not going to get into those differences here, I'll just focus on the Genesis version. The evil Dracos has turned all the monks into stone, and evil is spread throughout the land, and you play as the warrior Rohan, who has made it his mission to free the monks and defeat Dracos. So yeah, this game is a platforming hack and slasher, and this game does do stuff that I like, but it also has some very bizarre gameplay mechanics. To start with, the gameplay is incredibly fast and responsive for this type of game. You can throw your weapon pretty quickly, and it's a good thing you can, because the enemies will be appearing on screen almost non-stop. Your main goal is to destroy all the monk statues to free the monks. If you fail to do that by the time you reach the level exit, it won't let you pass and you have to play through the whole stage again. Often you'll find silver coins that will be in bags or dropped by enemies. At least that's what I thought they were at first. It turns out they are actually armor links, and if you can collect 33, you'll obtain silver armor, which will cut the damage you take in half. If you can collect 67 armor links, you'll get the gold armor, which will negate all damage. However, it doesn't make you invincible because when you do get hit or fall into a pit, you'll lose armor links. So it's possible you could lose the armor you currently have. Throughout the level, you'll need to pick up gate keys in order to destroy the gatekeepers, but of course it's not that simple. Once you put the key in the gate, you'll have to chant to find the proper chant tune, which the gate will play for you. You'll just need to copy the directions shown, like a game of Simon, to destroy the gate, allowing you to pass. Destroying a gate will spawn a few weapon options as well you could pick up, so you aren't stuck throwing knives the whole game. Now, all of this that I've mentioned so far, I don't really have a problem with. I actually think the way you get and upgrade your armor is pretty clever, and performing chants isn't really a problem because the game prevents enemies from attacking while you're working on the gate. However, I'm about to get into some really bizarre stuff here. Now, I mentioned that you have to pick up items in the game, but you can't just walk over things to pick them up. You have to actually be on the item and press down to collect it. Pushing down will pick up everything you're standing on all at once. The problem is, there are some items that perhaps you don't want to pick up, like the item that looks like an arrow pointing to the left. Picking that item up will give you 10,000 points, or it'll teleport you to an earlier portion of the level. There are also apples which will give you 10,000 points, or increase your health at the expense of putting you to sleep for a while. And that wouldn't be so bad, except you've got a limited amount of time to complete each level. Now, one of the oddest things this game does is if you increase your health past your maximum health points, it'll give you an additional life and start refilling a new health bar from the beginning, which means you can actually lose health by gaining too much health. It's one of the strangest things I've ever seen in a game like this. Now, what sucks is if you get hit with only a little bit of health, not only do you lose the life, but you'll lose a good portion of your armor links as well, and the timer for the level does not reset. The only good thing is that when you die, you'll usually continue right from where you died. But still, imagine this scenario. You're at max health and you're running out of time. You pick up an apple and you lose even more time because you got put to sleep. And while you gain a life, you have far less health than what you had. And say you just get hit again and that causes you to die. And you'll respawn again, but maybe now even without the armor you had. And now there's not enough time to complete the level. So time runs out, you lose another life, and you have to start the level all over again. Oh, and if you die due to running out of time, your health doesn't refill either. Because of this weird health mechanic and the fact that you're always rushing to beat the clock, and enemies are just always spawning, and the chant tunes start to get extremely long in the later levels, it's just too much, and I have to say no to this game. 4 out of 10. Oh, and one more thing. If you enter EOA on the high score screen and then go into the options, there will then be a level select, and I encourage you to check it out, because not only will it allow you to start at whatever level you want, it'll give you max armor links and max weapon power. Just don't be fooled by the level numbers it shows. There are only 12 levels in the game. If you choose anything above 12, it'll just show you the crappy game ending screen. Alright, I've played Street Racer before, but it wasn't this version. I remember renting it for the PlayStation back in the day, and I thought it was kind of bland. The version included in this collection is the Super Nintendo version, which was originally released in 1994, and I was kind of curious to see if I felt the same way about it. And yeah, this feels like dollar store Mario Kart. The game uses the same Mode 7 effect for racing, but I don't know exactly what it is, but everything in the distance is just kind of hard to make out, especially items in the ground, which include turbos, stars, repair kits, and mines. You'll be driving and all of a sudden you'll be spinning and flying in the air because you hit a mine and you never saw it. Another odd thing is you never actually lose control or speed, so it doesn't really affect you that much. Sure, you'll take a bit of damage, but I don't think that even matters. The whole game tries to sell itself like it's Mario Kart mixed with Street Fighter, and there's even a health bar on the screen while you're racing. But this meter is incredibly hard to fully deplete during a race because you're constantly picking up health, and even when it does get fully depleted, nothing seems to happen. To further identify itself as some sort of Mario Karting road rash, 4 buttons are dedicated to attacking: punch right, punch left, a special front attack, and special side attack. You don't even have to collect anything to use these attacks, just attack whenever you want to. The only problem is that all of these attacks only work at close range. There are no long-range attacks at all in this game, which severely limits any type of strategy you could have for taking the lead if you're behind. There are 8 characters to choose from, all with different stats, though I really don't think the stats matter that much at all, and I'll tell you why. There's actually a cheat code you could use on the driver select screen. On the Evercade controller, press YX, 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 and then press and hold Y. While holding Y, you could press up, down, left, and right to alter your driver stats. So naturally, I was always driving with maxed out stats, no matter which character I chose. But then I wanted to see how hard it would be to race with the lowest stats possible, and you know what? I won every race on the first try. Now granted, this was on easy mode, but my point is that it didn't seem any harder to play. There are a couple other game modes, such as the Rumble mode, where everybody fights in an arena until there's only one driver left. Now this is the only mode where I've seen drivers get KO'd, but do you know what's missing from the screen? Your health bar. Did they accidentally put the health bar on the screen for racing and forgot to include it in this Rumble mode? The one mode where it would actually matter? It just seems so weird. There is one other mode, and that's the soccer mode, but you're not going to mistake this for Rocket League or anything. There's only one goal and there are no teams, it's just a free-for-all. Whoever shoots the ball into the goal gets the points. There's no dribbling or anything. You could literally carry the ball until you shoot, or what's more likely going to happen is you'll get bumped into by somebody else and you'll lose the ball. And that's the thing that makes this mode a bit frustrating. The arena isn't that big to begin with, and there are 8 cars driving around, so it's very rare that you could get the ball and have a clear shot on the goal. And even then, sometimes you'll shoot and the game will just decide, nah, you don't deserve a goal, and bounce it away. In these non-racing modes, the control scheme seems kind of unintuitive as well, because they use a button for acceleration, but you have to push down on the D-pad to brake and reverse, and it just doesn't feel right. So I really didn't enjoy playing the Rumble or soccer modes, but I'm not going to say I totally didn't like the racing. I'll say it's just barely passable. 6 out of 10. Alright, regardless of how I rate this game, I'm just going to say straight out that Glover is the focus of this collection. And not because Glover is front and center on the cover of the box, but mostly because this is the first Nintendo 64 game that has appeared on the Evercade. Now, this isn't exactly the same game that appeared on the Nintendo 64 back in 1998, as Piko Interactive has significantly modified the ROM. The anti-aliasing has been removed, so the game has way more jagged lines than it ever did. And I think that was done so it runs better on the Evercade hardware. And it is modifications to the ROM and not the emulator, because I copied the ROM off the cart and ran it on my PC through a Nintendo 64 emulator, and it looked exactly the same. But not only that, Piko replaced the talking hat character that gives hints throughout the game with Katie, the Evercade mascot, making this version unique to the Evercade. So the game story is that Wizard is concocting some potion, and an accident occurs that causes both his gloves to fall off and become sentient while he turns to stone. The right glove flies out the window, and the left glove falls into the potion. That glove becomes the evil cross-stitch, and you'll control the right glove, Glover. All of the crystals on the castle fall, and before they hit the ground and shatter, Glover transforms them all into bouncy balls, and they each bounce off into different worlds. Glover then has to go and collect them and return them to the castle. Now this is a 3D platformer, and I'm not normally a huge fan of these types of games, but at least now, while playing on the Evercade VS, I can use a controller with an analog stick, and it makes the game way more playable than just using a D-pad. Also, Glover isn't strictly a run and jump type of platformer. Sure, you can run around as just the glove, but much of the game you'll be pushing and bouncing a ball around, and that takes some getting used to, especially when you can't allow Glover or the ball to take too much damage or fall off the level. And you really do have to master the controls, because the game will have you in very deadly situations pretty frequently, and you can't really afford to be moving around haphazardly. One of the major obstacles in the game, though, is the camera. You can rotate the camera using the L and R buttons, but if the camera hits a wall, it'll just stop, and at the same time you can't see the wall the camera's hitting, so it just feels like it's not working until you realize, oh, there's probably a wall there. Now the camera may stop when it hits a wall, but there's nothing stopping it from positioning itself behind a wall, completely blocking your view of the action. Now this is a nuisance, but I wouldn't say it happens so frequently that I'd stop playing the game because of it. The controls themselves are a bit cumbersome. I mean, there's a lot of maneuvers Glover can do, and many of them are mapped to the same button, so sometimes I do something on accident, like throw the ball while trying to dribble it, and I would get mad at something like that if I didn't have save states available to me. The puzzle elements of the game aren't really too difficult to figure out. You can transform the ball into a bowling ball or a ball bearing, and it's usually pretty obvious at which points in the game you'll need to do that. Throughout the game, you can collect these things called garibs, and what they are these cards with stars on them, and I'm just going to call them star cards because I think garibs is a stupid name. Anyway, collecting them is worthwhile because collecting every 10 of them will restore one of Glover's hit points, and every 50 will give you an extra life. The game, though, really wants you to collect them because it's constantly showing you how many are left in each level, and after you beat the boss in each world, it'll tell you, you missed this many garibs. Now, the reason it's telling you is because if you collect them all in a world, you'll unlock a bonus level. And you know what? I didn't unlock one bonus level because some of these magic cards are in really difficult places to reach or even find. I mean, I originally started out collecting every card I saw, but then when I realized that every card I saw was not every card in the level, I was like, screw that. And I just only collected the cards I saw and seemed within reach. Glover, I'll say, is an interesting game that can be frustrating at times. I'll give it a 7 out of 10 with the caveat that you play with an analog controller. I don't even want to think about playing this with just the D-pad. Before I had played Mermaids of Atlantis, there was only one thing I knew about it. That it's the clean version of Bubble Bath Babes, a game that only gets talked about because it's an unlicensed NES game that has naked women and now goes for a small fortune. What I found interesting when researching was that there are actually 4 different versions of this game, and all of them were released in 1991. It was originally released as Soap Panic in Japan, and then as Bath Bubble Babes in North America. These are the original, completely uncensored versions. And then it was released as Magic Bubble, which added a few more game options, altered the color palette, and censored the women by adding bubbles over the images. Then there's this version we got here on the Evercade, Mermaids of Atlantis, the riddle of the magic bubble, which is basically Magic Bubble, but with the women replaced with mermaids, and a whole story added to this game, which I'll touch on later. Now, I knew that this was a puzzle game, but I always just kind of assumed that it wasn't that great because nobody ever talks about the gameplay when bringing up this game. So I was kind of surprised at how good this game was when I understood how it plays. There's a group of multicolored bubbles that will rise to the top of the screen, and you can flip the pattern horizontally and vertically. Now, it's important to realize that you're not rotating the pieces. You are literally flipping them one way or the other. After you place the piece at the top of the screen, if there are any bubbles that don't have anything above them, then air pockets will form. If you get 4 of the same colored bubbles to connect, they'll disappear and the bubble and air pockets will rise up, taking the place of the popped bubbles. Air pockets can be removed if a bubble below them has popped and there are no other bubbles directly below them. The funny thing about air pockets that I didn't originally realize is that you can actually slide bubbles into them, and that's another way air pockets can be removed. Sometimes a glowing bubble will appear, and this will change the surrounding bubbles to the same color at random. But even better than that is the magic ability you can earn. Occasionally a bubble will appear containing a letter in the word magic, and if you can pop it before the letter disappears, then you'll get to keep that letter until you're able to spell the word magic, which will give you a special ability you can use at any time. Pushing down on A will activate the ability, and this will automatically eliminate all the air pockets, let the bubbles pop if they now manage to connect 4, and then randomize the colors of the remaining bubbles, allowing for the added potential for more bubbles to pop. I really got into this game. It could get difficult at times, but every time I lost it felt like it was entirely my fault. I found the best way to play was to position the pieces to form as few air pockets as possible, even if it means not matching 4 bubbles at every opportunity. There are a few things that this game fumbles though. There isn't an unlimited mode in this game. Rather, you'll play 4 stages with 5 levels each, and I initially couldn't figure out what was causing each level to end, but it turns out that each level ends when you pop 200 bubbles. I think that's something they should be indicating on the screen while you're playing. Another thing I didn't know until I read the manual was that you could store more than one magic ability. So if you could spell magic twice, then you could use the ability twice. I didn't realize the ability stacked. The manual even says it's up to you to remember how many you've collected. Yeah, well, I shouldn't have to remember, it should be displayed on the screen. Also, the music in the game could have been a lot better. There are 3 tunes that you can select from, and none of them are really that great. At the very least, there should have been a randomization option so I have to listen to the same tune throughout the whole game. Anyway, despite all this, I still really like this game. But before I give it a score and move on, I have to talk about the game's story. As you play, in between some stages you'll see a cutscene, and all I'll say is that as the story goes on, it becomes really apparent that the creators of the game really hate Nintendo. But fortunately for you, you don't have to play the game to see the story. On the game's title screen, if you push select, up, up, down, down, left, left, right, right, A, A, B, B, then the game will just play the whole story for you to enjoy. I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. The game I thought was the best in Piko Interactive Collection 3 was Zero Tolerance, a first-person shooter that was originally released on the Sega Genesis that was surprisingly fun to play. I liked it so much, I gave it a 9 out of 10. So when I heard Zero Tolerance Underground was going to be in this collection, I thought, oh cool, they're giving us the sequel that went unreleased. Turns out I was wrong. That unreleased sequel was called Beyond Zero Tolerance. So what in the world is Zero Tolerance Underground? Well, it turns out there was a canceled port of Zero Tolerance that was going to be for the Sega CD, and it was going to have additional levels added. So Piko Interactive decided, hey, let's release those additional levels as a standalone game. And voila! Zero Tolerance Underground. But it seems like they did the bare minimum to create this. The title screen still just says Zero Tolerance, and as you would expect, everything is exactly the same as it was in the original game. You select from 5 characters, run around shooting creatures and other enemies, and you clear each level by eliminating all the hostiles. You have a limited amount of items you could carry, and if you die, you can select another character and they pretty much carry on where you left off. The game is over if all 5 characters die. I mean, it's certainly not a bad thing that this is more of the same, but the downside is that this doesn't really feel like a full game. I mean, this whole game only comprises of 9 levels that all take place in a subway. For comparison, the original game had 40 levels that took place in 7 different environments. What they should have done is just added these levels into the original game like what was originally intended, because as it is, it just kind of feels like a demo. However, it is still fun to play, but I gotta knock it down a couple pegs for not really being a full game. 7 out of 10. Well, time to rank the collection against all the other Evercade carts. And I gotta say that this one was rather lackluster. I mean, how sad is it that what I feel is the best game in the collection is also the one I said doesn't even feel like a full game? So Piko Interactive Collection 4, I'm banishing you to the F realm, just above Sydney Hunter Collection and just under Team 17 Collection 1. So next time I was trying to figure out if I should do the Tomb Raider collection that had the 3 Tomb Raider games or Thalamus collection. These 2 carts were released at the same time. As it is now, I'm leaning towards doing the Tomb Raider ones first, just so I could play those games. I'm really interested in seeing how these... It's been a really long time since I played Tomb Raider, so might jump into these next, and then move on to the Thalamus collection after that. So, I think that'll wrap it up for now. I'll see you all next time. Bye.